Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I will be reviewing Eberron Rising from the Last War for Dungeons and Dragons from Wizards of the Coast. So, is this new setting book a must have for everybody out there playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, or can you easily take a pass? You'll find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Yes, I'm Jeff McAleer, back once again as your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, I am going to be reviewing and doing a really quick page through of Dungeons and Dragons Eberron Rising from the Last War from Wizards of the Coast. I know there are a lot of people who are eagerly anticipating this new source book. It is arriving in stores on November 19th. It is 320 pages. It will carry an MSRP of $49.99. So let's swing on over to the other camera. I will start sharing my thoughts on Eberron Rising from the Last War. All right, so this is the alternate cover for Eberron Rising from the Last War. Now, when I did my full-length page through, I used the standard edition, standard cover, and I thought, well, let's take a peek at the cover for the alternate edition, which is available at your friendly local game stores starting on November 19th. In fact, that is when both editions of this book will be available. And of course, the only difference is the cover. Everything else is going to be the same. So I'm going to pop in here. We're going to page through pretty quickly. I've already done a pretty thorough, in-depth page through in a previous video last week. So by all means, if you want to see almost basically page by page, check that out. So we start off the book. It's pretty much giving us an introduction to the setting. This is a kind of noirish, swashbuckling pulp adventure, magic-fueled, kind of a magic punk sort of setting here. And what has happened in Eberron is this huge war was going on, and the war has ended. It is considered the last war. Yes, I'm sure, the war to end all wars, right? But one of the aspects of it, there were the 5 nations that were all fighting, and there was a huge cataclysm that none of the nations actually had anything to do with. So they all thought, well, wait a second, maybe we should put this this to bed here, as opposed to destroying all the nations. So now the world is actually broken down into 12 nations. So we get into some character creation, talk about some different races. We've got some new races, of course. There's discussion of the traditional D&D races as well, and what kind of tweaks and changes have been made. We do have the changelings. They are new. Pretty cool. They can take on the appearance of other people. So I thought that was interesting. Talk about dragonborn dwarves. We got gnomes. We got halflings. We got elves. We've got the goblinoids. So there are a few different goblinoids that you can actually play as, right? So one of the aspects of Eberron is that you still have alignments, but alignments don't seem as important. Plus, especially with like a lot of creatures and things like that, dragons as an example. Depending on the color of a dragon, normally that's going to determine, oh, well, is that dragon chaotic good? Is it lawful evil? In this situation, dragons are a bit different. They are more monstrous, but they are not necessarily always going to be, well, that's a gold dragon, so we know. Nope, absolutely not. And that's a bit of how this plays out with many of the creature races. So we also have the Kalishtar, which is another new race. We've got the Shifters, which are kind of like lycanthropes. So you could be like a werewolf, werebear, shift, become a beast. Tieflings, the Warforged. This is one race that I think longtime fans of D&D are maybe going to have a problem with. That the Warforged are not as powerful as they once were, as far as I understand. I have seen some grumbling, some whinging online about the Warforged. Once again, I'll point out that I played original D&D, I played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, I played a teeny bit of second edition, read some books in third and fourth edition, didn't really play any, didn't read much either. And then really fifth edition is kind of my reintroduction back to D&D. So I don't have a dog in the fight. But I can see just checking out the Warforged, just the racial information there. It's kind of like, yeah, they're kind of cool, but I don't know why people would be all like pumped to play them. So I guess they're not as powerful as they once were. We do have the dragon marks, which I think are pretty cool. Dragon marks, there are basically different houses because there's a lot of political intrigue going on in this world. Of course, you can do that in really any role-playing game setting. But each of the houses have a dragon mark, and if you don't have to have a dragon mark, but you can, and that dragon mark will give you a special ability. Also, there are variants too. So, for an example, here we've got the mark of making. So, if you have a human character and you're taking the mark of making as your dragon mark, you actually have some options as far as your abilities, as opposed to what's in the player's handbook. You can choose these special variants instead. So we've got a dozen of those. Like I said, I pretty cool. I like how they kind of give some of the standard races a bit of a boost. So here we have the variant for the half elf for the mark of the mark of storm. Then we talk about the different aberrant dragon marks. You've got the feet aberrant dragon mark. You have a background now that's available to players in Eberron, and it is the house agent. So you've actually sworn fealty to one of the dragon houses. Got a brand new class, the Artificer, and I honestly, I'm not sure how well this class is going to go over with folks. Now, this is the first new class. It's officially been added to Dungeons and Dragons since 5th edition came out. A few things to point out. The spell list are all established spells. There are no new spells for the Artificer. The Artificer is just kind of a mix between kind of like a wizard and a tinkerer. You can infuse items, you can duplicate items, you can branch out, have different specialties such as alchemist, artillerist, battlesmith. So you can infuse items with powers. There's the replicating magic items. So I find it interesting. I find it an interesting character class. But I think some folks are going to be taken aback by the fact that there aren't any new spells that are designed specifically for this class. As far as the spells go as well, there are some that are from Xanathar's Guide to Everything that you may want to have that book if you are planning on either running a game that will feature that character class or if you want to play that character class. Now, one section of this book that actually, there's a pretty good page count devoted to this that I think is really cool are group patrons. So you're having your characters have like a patron organization or a specific individual as a patron. Patrons play a huge role in Dungeon Crawl Classics. Patrons here are not being utilized in that same exact way as in DCC, but I do like the fact that we have all these different patrons that you could possibly have supporting your adventuring group. You can have a dragon marked house. There can be a criminal syndicate. You can actually have royalty on your side. Very, very cool. I really definitely, there's head of state. So, for an example, the Prince of New Sierra. Another aspect that runs throughout the book are these little boxes here that kind of have headlines, little news pieces. Thought they're kind of interesting. They make for some good ideas for little adventure nuggets. The artwork throughout, I like. The artwork is pretty consistent in style. Some of these are a little different. There are a few images throughout that kind of look like they've escaped from a Pathfinder book because they have a bit more of that cartoonish look to it. As you can see, military force, and then a newspaper. I thought that was kind of cool. You could actually work for a newspaper or have the newspaper as your patron, that your adventures that you're going out on are, you're actually providing them with the stories to share with their readers. So I thought that was kind of cool. So it talks about the benefits of having the patron, some adventure ideas for the patron, building your group, university, working for a university as having that as your patron. Like I said, this is really, really nicely done. I thought that was very cool. Very cool addition. I like that. I would like to see that carry over into just Forgotten Realms. So, chapter 2 is going to really talk about the world of Corvair. So, we've got a gazetteer talking about the different nations. As I mentioned, there were 12 following the war. Originally, there were 5. And kind of go through it. Just kind of talks about specific some areas of each of these nations that are kind of important, what cities there might be, what the capital is, what took place after the war. And we do have dinosaurs in the world of Eberron. Not to the extent as we saw in, say, like Tomb of Annihilation, but there are dinosaurs, especially on the Talenta Plains. I was scorched by the silver flame. Some of these headlines are kind of like almost like tabloid style too. There's one that's like the tree hugger. So this is a lot of info dump going on here. I was kind of surprised that we didn't start off the book with this, just to kind of give you a feel for the setting. It's almost kind of assume that you have an understanding of Eberron to start off with. That's why we get into the character creation stuff. I don't know. I was just kind of surprised. It's just my personal opinion on that I would have thought we would have seen this early on and then followed up. Because some of this character creation stuff, it's like, well, so what does that have to do with the actual setting? So if you read about the setting first, then you see, oh, okay, so I understand what the whole dragon mark thing is about, things like that. Also get into some of the religions of Eberron as well. Get into some of the dark societies. Then we have a whole chapter about the major city Sharn, giving you lots of information about the different wards, the different setup of the city, the way the city is laid out, getting around the city. So quite a bit of information. Once again, this is a gazetteer about Sharn itself. Kind of talk once again, a lot of good information, little tidbits for the dungeon master as far as, oh yeah, maybe, I might want to put together an adventure like that in this ward. So it talks about some of the different factions as well throughout the city too. Then we get into the game master information, which doesn't necessarily say, hey, this is really for dungeon masters here. But so I like this section because it talks about building Eberron adventures and how your adventures should be different than a traditional Forgotten Realms sort of D&D. Talking about different themes. Although I have to laugh. I thought this was recurring villain. It's like, okay, how to keep villains alive? It's like, well, you can have a recurring villain. You got to keep them alive, right? So, so kind of talking about different villains, different styles of villains, different, once again, more factions, different cults. Here we go, the discussion about the dragons. So here it's the dragons of Eberron are much more than mere monsters. Adventurers will rarely barge into a dragon's lair in search of its treasure hoard. Dragons of the world are either aloof and unapproachable, or they are curious and manipulative, pulling strings behind the scenes or trying to influence the world in arcane ways. Almost along the lines of the dragons like in Shadowrun. So, there is loads of stuff going on in this section here. We get ideas for different campaigns, different locations. We get some example maps. So I thought this was really nicely done. So, and it's all just, it's not just, okay, you're going to play through all this stuff. It's giving the dungeon master some ideas of, okay, so what kind of campaign do you want to put together in Eberron? You can play a campaign that's during the last war if you want. Then it talks about we've got some of these areas like we've got the Lords of Dust, we've got the Lord of Blades. We'll actually get some stat blocks in the back about that as well. There we go. The Mournland, which is the location where that cataclysm took place, which is known as the Mourning. And as I mentioned before, it's kind of up to the dungeon master what exactly happened. So I thought that was, in one way, I thought that was kind of cool, and then another way, I thought that was kind of an easy out. So loads and loads of different kinds of campaigns that you can put together as far as Eberron. We also get an example of one of the lightning trains, showing us one of the air ships here as well. Maybe you want to do adventures in the city of Sharn. This setting is really geared towards, dark noir, kind of urban adventures as well. This does really, to me, just in my opinion, Eberron kind of has a kitchen sink feel to it, where it's like everything but the kitchen sink has been thrown in. So you've got pulp adventure, you've got swashbuckling adventure, you've got dark noir, which kind of conflicts with those styles. You've got the magic punk aspect of it. You've got these strange technologies. You've got dinosaurs. So, like I said, you've got a lot of things thrown in here. Some probably fit better than others. So we have a section about forgotten relics, which is an adventure. We'll get a short adventure. Actually, it's not that short, but we get a first adventure. The adventure is pretty decent. I wouldn't say it's the best introductory adventure that you're going to find for D&D. I think the starter set as well as the essentials kit have better adventures. Of course, they are longer adventures too, so that probably has a bit to do with it. But this adventure should give you a good idea of the sorts of tales that you can tell in Eberron. Okay, so then we get into treasures. We don't get a ton of new magic items. Talks about dragon shards. We got like 3 or 4 pages of new magic items. And we talk about the common, everyday magic items. Then we kind of get into a bestiary. So we will have some new monsters, some new creatures in here. We will also have some creatures that are tweaked from what you're used to seeing in standard D&D and Forgotten Realms. I thought that's a pretty cool looking, and it's the Dulgrim. So some pretty cool creatures and monsters in here. And we also do have, for an example, right here, I was going to say Lord of Blades. Now that is an individual. So that is not a like race of creatures. There is only one Lord of Blades. So we get the different overlords who are very, very evil and completely alien. Then we'll actually get some NPCs to finish up. So we get some generic NPCs to wrap up the book. And then we've got the map, which I have not removed from this edition. All right, so that's what we got with Eberron Rising from the Last War. Shared some thoughts about it. Let's swing on over to the other camera, and I will provide my final thoughts and my review score. So what are my thoughts about Eberron Rising from the Last War? I'd say I've got kind of a little bit of mixed feelings about it. I still think that this is a good supplement. I did enjoy quite a bit of it. I do have some critiques. Some people may think they're fairly minor, but critiques nonetheless. But let's start off. Let's talk about things that I do like about Eberron Rising from the Last War. First off, I think the setting itself is interesting. It does have kind of a everything but the kitchen sink thrown into it feel that I think detracts from it a little bit, but I do like the kind of magic punk aspect to it, as well as the fact that these different nations almost have this pre-World War I vibe to them. Even though, yes, the world is emerging from this last war, there still has that kind of like simmering hostilities just kind of bubbling up under the surface, sort of like pre-World War I Europe. So I do definitely like that. I think the patron section is excellent, can easily be used in other settings, doesn't have to be just Eberron. And I actually found myself kind of daydreaming a little bit about, yeah, I could see my player characters being sort of investigative journalists, or just writing about their adventures in that for a newspaper as a patron. There are a lot of different patrons as well for you to choose from, and I think that was very, very well done. I do like two of the new races. I think they stand out pretty well. We've got the changeling and we've got the shifters, so I thought those were pretty cool. I do have to mention, though, in the section about the new races, doesn't seem to be a ton of information. Doesn't seem to be as much detail as we see in the player's handbook for the traditional fantasy races. We'll mention, I am pretty sure that folks out there who are very familiar with Eberron from prior editions of Dungeons and Dragons are not going to be too thrilled with the Warforged. It does feel kind of gimped. They don't seem very powerful. It's an interesting aspect, I guess, because they're constructed war machines who are intelligent and now have their own freedom. But I don't know if I'd be all that pumped to actually run one as a player. But interesting nonetheless. But I have a feeling that people are going to be kind of disappointed. They were expecting more. Talking about expecting more, I'm surprised that we don't have some new spells for the Artificer class. All the spells are just simply those already published. I think the class itself is okay. I personally, I don't know if I'd play a character from that class. I always play paladins usually anyway, but I do want to say that it is interesting, and especially at the higher levels, there are some really cool mechanical devices that you can infuse with magic, so I do dig that. I think that's pretty cool too. The gazetteer of both the world as well as the city of Sharn are nicely done, even if they are kind of info dumps. And that is one of the issues that I do have with the game supplement is there's a lot of telling as opposed to showing. There's a lot of info dump. And I am also very surprised that we didn't get kind of the background world information prior to the mechanics and like creating new characters section, because I would have thought that if we had, say, the gazetteer and everything first, then you'd be sitting there saying, oh, okay, so this stuff makes sense when I'm creating a character. Whereas if you're not familiar with Eberron, you're just kind of creating something like off the top of your head if you're going directly, chapter 1 on. But still, it's not a huge critique. Do feel that this book is not as well focused as prior supplements have been. Maybe that's just kind of the kitchen sink aspect of it. There is a lot of telling, not showing. Kind of giving you an idea. Eberron is supposed to be a noirish setting, which everybody's got different definitions of noir, and I don't know if noir really fits Eberron in my opinion, but we're told that it is a noir setting. We get a few paragraphs talking about that, and then that's it, as opposed to actually showing us through what's going on in the Gazetteer, in the Sharn section as well, that yes, this is a kind of noirish setting itself. Political intrigue does not make noir, at least in my opinion. So overall, I like the book. If you're like not really excited about a new setting and you're very comfortable with what you've already got as far as 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, this isn't a must pick up, although you do have the Artificer class that can be used in anything. It doesn't have to be Eberron. Plus you got the patrons, so that's pretty cool too. If you were really eagerly anticipating this book, I think you should be happy if maybe you're newer to D&D and you haven't played prior editions. I do have the impression that folks who have been playing D&D and have followed it for many editions are going to be a little disappointed. I think there's going to be some things that got a little bit of a short shift, say like the Warforged, or maybe were left out completely. Other little critique I have is that for many of the items that are really interesting, we get enough information about it to pique your interest, but not necessarily enough information to really make it easy for the dungeon master to present at the table. All of this said, I still think this is a really nicely presented book. The quality of the book is top-notch, as usual. We're used to seeing that from Wizards of the Coast. I do like the artwork for the most part. It's pretty uniform, and I do dig it. A few pieces that were a little too cartoony that didn't seem like they fit the whole motif, but still, all in all, nicely done. On a scale of 1 to 10, I do have to say I am positive about it. I have a positive impression of this book. Maybe not as high as some of the previous releases we've seen in the past year or two from Wizards of the Coast, but I still give this an 8.3 out of 10. So I can definitely recommend picking it up, especially for those out there who do not really have any sort of background with Eberron like myself. I really enjoyed reading the book, even with the small critiques that I've got. All right, so that's it for this time out. As I'd like to point out, if you like the video, please give it a quick thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do. And if you do, don't forget, ring that little bell, because not only will it notify you of when I upload new videos, it'll also inform you when my live show, The Daily Dope, airs Mondays through Fridays right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, please go visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. By now you know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I am Jeff McAleer. I will be back next time, and until then, happy trails. Zoobity-bity-bity-boo-boo. Zoobity-bity-bity-boo. Zabba-dabba-dabba-dabba-bum. Zibbit. Whoa, hey. I didn't realize that you were still here. Well, if that's the case, then allow me to share the following information with you that I only have 20 seconds to do. So let's all take a deep breath. So, if you would like to subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel, please click right here. If you want to check out the latest episode of The Daily Dope, click right here. And if you'd like to check out a randomly selected standalone video, by all means, click right here. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and thanks for watching.